So this is the second part of this design development lecture, and it's called Change One Thing, Swatch Stories of Design Development. This follows on from the collection building exercise in that it's also an idea generation technique, but in this case I'm showing you how to execute something very similar through swatching and stitch pattern and tessellation design development. So what I'm going to start with is my collection with Jen Arnold Culliford of AC Techniques from a few years back, the Something to Knit Together Winter Edition. There are 5 pieces in this collection altogether. We have got the assembly scarf, the Unite sweater, the fond mittens, the Reunite cardigan, which you can see is simply a cardigan version of the Unite sweater we saw a couple of slides ago. And then finally, the huddle hat. So, the starting point for this collection was a swatch from a stitch library. And stitch libraries, you may know about some of these already. You have some by Barbara Walker. The one that I used in this instance was from the Harmony Guides. And you can see the texture that I chose on the right hand side of your screen now. And this was something that I thought about when I got the design brief from Jen. When she asked me to do their winter edition, she wanted to have something that was garments and accessories, something that was similar but different. So she was looking for cohesion and unity between the stitch patterns or the garments or accessories themselves. Something that was going to be easy for knitters to follow, something that was going to be nice to knit. We all want garments that are a pleasure to knit because they're amongst the largest projects, and something that doesn't require much concentration. So Jen had given me the option of doing colour work, but I felt more drawn to texture with her yarn. And so my immediate thought for a texture that follows the or meets the criteria above was garter stitch. So garter stitch is ideal for this. It's been around for a long time, obviously, and I was not going to sit around reinventing the wheel with this. So that was my reason for using stitch libraries. And it depends very much on the kind of inspiration that you have with your projects, really. If it's something that already exists or something that already inspires you, this is where they're really useful. They're a jumping off point. So I noted down when looking through my stitch libraries, anything that jumped out at me. What kind of garter stitch textures do they have? And so I noted down anything that I particularly liked or could use as a starting point. And so I chose this basket weave texture here. Because one part of the brief from Jen involved something that didn't require too much concentration, I was immediately drawn to this basket weave because you can see that there is a 4-row repeat and then the first and third rows, so 50% of the pattern repeat includes plain knitting rows. And that was something that stayed with me throughout the designing of this whole collection. So I thought, let me start there. What can I do with this particular stitch pattern in the stitch library? So the last thing I'll say before I leave the slides and switch to the overhead camera is that I began here by evaluating what I did and did not like about the basket weave. I like the garter texture, we already established that. I like the fact that there were some plain knit rows and they were in good quantity. But the thing that my eye did not like about this is that it didn't appear to have enough definition, or at least not enough for me. It looked like there was not much between this and plain garter stitch. It just felt that that single knit stitch in there was getting lost amongst all the garter ridges, and the light was bouncing all over the place in that dappled way that it does when you've got knitted texture. So my very first task, as far as my design brief, my aesthetic as a designer was concerned, was to add a little bit more definition, and that's what we're going to move on to now. So, as I was saying just previously, one of my first jobs with the Swatch development for the Something to Knit Together Winter Edition collection was to get more light into the garter stitch texture that was in the stitch library. And so the way that I decided to do that was to open up the pattern a little bit. So we had a single column of knit stitches sandwiched in between the garter in the original Stitch Library version. And so the first thing that I wanted to do was to change the scale of the pattern repeat. If you remember just previously, it was a knit 3 purl 1 pattern, and all that I've done here is add in a couple of extra stitches. So it was gone from knit 3 purl 1 to knit 4 purl 2, and that's the difference that this has made here. So what that has done is change the proportion of the knit stitches in the swatch from that same page in the book, and that one change has already made a huge difference to the appearance of that texture. So the first thing I want to say is that sometimes you don't need to do very much at all to get the change that you want. It's made a massive difference, and I was looking for more definition, and I've already got that. You can also see how it exposed the lines of the pattern. It emphasizes this really beautiful diagonal stepped effect, and I don't think that that was particularly well defined in the original swatch. So I decided that I would keep the knit 2 element throughout until I decided it didn't work anymore, and that became the starting point for working on this collection. The other thing that I did that you can see just on the left here was get the squared paper out. If you've read my blog at all, you know that I'm a massive fan of squared paper. I do not design anything without it. It's something that I cannot do without it. And what I do when I'm swatching is to work with the knitting and the squared paper at the same time. So what you can see that I've done here is to note down the pattern repeat and then just draw out the entire stitch repeat or several repeats charted as well. So this might be an obvious thing to do to some of you, but I just would recommend absolutely working on squared paper. Give yourself as many visuals as you can. And what you'll see later on in this lesson is that having the squared paper beside the knitting saves you a ton of time. It helps you to think. You can't do all your thinking inside your head. It's really good to have some visuals, as many visuals as possible as well. And the drawing is there to support you. Also, having the squared paper in the same position as the swatch will help you to see what the squared paper version looks like and what the swatch looks like. It just helps you to go back and forth, and you'll train your eye to see, okay, what do I need to tweak? And over time, that will save you a bit of labour, because then you won't have to necessarily cast on every single swatch once you get plugged into that way of seeing. In the same way that you do observational drawings, that will make this stage a lot easier. Certainly if you hit a purple patch and you've got lots of ideas going, then you can work through them on squared paper and then decide which ones you're going to swatch. Because yarn is a bit more finite than squared paper, you're less likely to run out of paper than you are to run out of yarn. And plus it will save your energy as well. It's much quicker to draw than it is to knit. The last thing to say before I move on to the next part of the story is that at this point in design development, I'm just testing out composition and ratios, things like that, or the artistic elements. The size of the swatch and the weight of the yarn is not particularly important. This will be changing throughout as I go through, and the colour will change as well. I haven't made any final decisions about colour yet. That comes towards the very end. You'll see in some of the swatches, some of them are in chunky yarn, which I have here. Some of them are in Aran, which is what the final collection was knitted in. And sometimes using different size yarns can be very beneficial, because the scale or the thickness of the yarn, that can indicate whether a design might be better on a finer yarn or a smaller yarn. And there's times certainly when I've knitted something up on a chunky yarn and it's looked much better on that than a worsted or a double knit. So you can kill two birds with one stone here and allow the squared paper to help you make decisions further down the line about what you most like to do or what's best. But this was the starting point, and you'll be seeing just as much squared paper as you will be knitting as we go on. So going back to the swatch, and this is what helped me to see that I'm onto something with the expansion of the pattern repeat. So again, I've just added a couple more stitches in, making it knit 4 purl 2 instead of knit 3 purl 1, and that was something as well that helped me to figure out which design principle was going to lead me here. Normally with swatches there'll be something that tells you where to go, and in this case for me it was the line of the design that was making me think, that was just making me excited. My eye was drawn to that more, just that diagonal stepped line or basket weave texture that I really wanted. So look at scale and proportion and line, all those design principles. That will help you to understand exactly what is making the pattern work or what you're drawn to. You can do it instinctively, that's absolutely fine, not saying you can't, but if you need to revise ideas or you need to revisit or there's something you need to tweak, then being able to tie it or be able to define exactly what is working and why is going to make you better at design. And sometimes you see this immediately, sometimes you might see a few swatches in, but having the design principles just in your back pocket will help you to have something to refer to if you're a little bit stuck. So again, it's just been one change here. And the next swatch is where I started to connect up a few lines alternately to start making different shapes. So I'll just put this to one side and bring in number 2. And you can see here that I haven't changed much. Again, I've just changed one thing at a time rather than several. And I've seen that I just want to see what it looks like, basically. So it's all about experimentation. So the pattern is much the same, and you can see that I've just created a few columns of knit stitch. So I've joined up some of the lines of the basket weave to create longer lines here. So say every third column or so. And that's just one change. And again, experimenting, not attached to this at all. But I just thought, okay, this is enough to tell me that I might carry on with that and see how it goes. So if I just bring the first one back to the screen, just so that you can see the difference. And again, you can see I've chosen a different yarn here as well, just to, there we are, just to see how it looks in something that is perhaps a little bit less defined. And here you can just tell that we have got, definitely this type of yarn spun is much better than the other one. So again, this is telling me that I'm happy, I'm going in the right direction, and doing lots of experimentation. So at that point, I started to get quite prolific with the squared paper. I thought, okay, so I've got the contrast of garter and stocking stitch here within these columns of broken